Hello, welcome to another cruiser inspection in World of Warships. And we are looking at some of the smoke cruisers now. I guess there's only two, really, Cerberus and Genan. The Cerberus. What is the Cerberus? Well, the Cerberus is a buffalo that trades its radar for a crawling smoke. Kind of in a nutshell, that's what it is. You have identical DPM. Like literally, you're within 1,000 HE DPM of Buffalo. You actually have significantly worse AP and AP DPM. You don't get the improved USN cruiser AP. But when it comes to HE, which is what you're going to be shooting, like probably 90% of the time in this thing, you're shooting Buffalo HE at people with a slightly improved fire chance. Basically, is kind of what's happening here. You get a fairly good crawling smoke. With this build, it's a minute, 2 minutes and almost 15 seconds total time that you can stay in it, which is pretty nice. And then you have a theoretical anti-submarine ability. Now, in my opinion, the sub surveillance you see here is 8 kilometers, 20 seconds. This is not what makes you good against subs. If you are trying to surveil subs and play whack-a-mole on submarines, the Venezia is almost like inarguably better because if the sub is at periscope depth, you like basically one-shot them with sap. Really, what makes this thing so good against subs is you get battleship ASW. You get 11-kilometer ASW planes. The bombs do a bit less damage than some BBs, but you get 3 charges. You can build up to 3 charges, so that is extremely, extremely nice. And basically what I'm kind of trying to do, because you have this really good range, right? You have a 18-kilometer base range. You kind of want to be very central in this thing, in my opinion. You see here, like my gun range covers a very, very large proportion of the map. Now, obviously, playing more central, there's perhaps a bit more risk involved. But this ship is not the paper armor that I've kind of seen some people try to pretend that it has. I would argue the Cerberus almost has like above average armor for heavy cruisers. You get 32 side, which is really really abnormal. Aside from like the Russian armored cruisers and ships like Napoli, there's not really any heavy cruiser, especially in the tech tree. Aside from Petro, I want to say this is the only other cruiser in the tech tree that can bounce 457s on its main side plating. Like the whole main side plating essentially. You do have a 25 nose and ass. You're a big target, right? So like, I'm not trying to say you can't get slammed. And obviously, if you go flat, you do in fact get slammed. But the key with the Cerberus is you just are farming damage in this thing, and you've kind of got to utilize almost like a minimum of 3 of these crawling smokes per game. They do have a 2-minute cooldown, so a whole cycle is about 4 minutes, right? Using a smoke and then the cooldown to get it back is a 4-minute cycle. So, and that's just because you don't really farm damage, like raw damage farming that impressively. Like I said, the fire chance is a bit better than Buffalo, so you have something like maybe 12 fires per minute compared to Buffalo's 10 something, right? But you're not a crazy fire starter, and you only have about, with reload mod, you only have around 225,000 HE DPM. Something like the Hindenburg, for example, just straight up out DPMs this thing effectively, especially because of the improved pen, right? You only pen 32 in this thing. But the AP is still quite good against broadside cruisers. Especially something like a Minotaur. You kind of have like Des Moines AP, but with all of the advantages taken away, and lower damage. Think of this AP like Hindenburg AP that hits for 2/3 as hard, right? But as far as like penetration goes, it's very similar to Hindenburg AP, right? It has no improved fuse, arming, anything like that, and yeah, you go flat and you take big damage in this thing when you're flat, right? I'm kind of botting the fuck out there to kill that Minotaur, and this Montana is like, ooh, look at that, a free broadside cruiser. Let's go ahead and slam him. So, pretty unfortunate. You definitely don't want to take hits like that. And the Cerberus, in my experience, is when like you're playing with your brain in your hands, like I was not there. Um, I don't want to say this cruiser is tanky, but it's definitely survivable. Like, there's definitely no reason that you should never open water in this thing. Like, if there's targets worth farming, um, like just use your guns, open water. Have your wits about you. Better than I did there. I was just kind of full greeting to kill that Minotaur, and took a 45k hit unnecessarily. But you definitely should not be afraid to open water in this thing, and that's going to lead me to my next recommendation. We will discuss it more, obviously, at the end in the spec, but rudder mod, steering gears. Steering gears in slot 5. I think, objectively, the correct choice on the Cerberus. I've said this about many of these other cruisers that I've reviewed that can take concealment and get... Like, this thing gets very good concealment, right? You get 10-kilometer concealment if you take concealment on your captain and in the upgrade slot, but I think it's bait. Um, I think it's bait because this thing is really big, so it's really easy to hit, and you kind of don't want to be, being in radar range of like Russian radar is not great, but at least the Russian cruisers don't have crazy DPM. Um, Getting radar in this thing by Des Moines is like a serious goddamn problem. You don't really need or want to play that close. I don't think you have this 18-kilometer range. The shell arcs are okay. And you don't really have like deterrence level DPM. Again, like something like a Des Moines, a Hindenburg does, where it can just park and slam damage into the enemy. That's kind of not really the point with this thing. The point is decent HE damage with fire starting, right? Because you do have about 20% better fire starting than most heavy cruisers get, right? Most heavy cruisers are typically in the 9 to 10.5 fires per minute range. And then the Cerberus, like with reload mod, with fire flags or skills on the captain, does like comfortably get around 13 fires a minute, which is very good. Very, very good. So, it's kind of acceptable HEDPM and then very decent fire starting is kind of the thing with this boat here. And that's, you don't, like I said, if one battleship is just pushing into you, you're not going to realistically pump out damage fast enough to really save yourself or deter that ship. So you really do kind of need to stay at arm's length against most ships in this game. Um, I mean, this kind of goes true of every cruiser to an extent, but in something like a Des Moines, right, which kind of has like the same HE shells that you do, Des Moines' two front guns are basically this ship's entire DPM. So something like a Des Moines can sit nose in and have deterrence level DPM, right? Something like Hindenburg can kind of show angle and not get slammed. Like, if a battleship player knows what they're doing and they aim through your nose or ass on this thing, like, you can definitely get citadeled through the ass and nose very, very easily in this. It's not, you're probably not going to get one shot at range randomly. I'm not saying that, but 10 kilometers, a Montana player who knows how to aim, like, you can definitely expect to lose half of your ship to one salvo through the stern or ass if this guy knows what he's doing. Again, that brings me to steering gears. I think it's just absolutely crucial. This ship goes from kind of I mean, it's fat, right? Like, you can see the size of this thing, how fat and tall, especially how tall it is. So, yeah, and, sap, lovely. We love sap. That's not even overmatching sap, right? That's just sap moment where you're at a 10-degree angle and you can get penetrated. Pretty cool stuff. But yeah, it's absolutely crucial. It also kind of enables you to farm without the smoke, which, this game I threw away 80% of my ship to one Montana salvo, so I can't farm without my smoke. But if I had not done that, right, I would be around 40, 45k HP right now if I hadn't taken that giant hit. And I would 100% be like pushing in and open water farming both Montanas and Marco Polo. That'd be totally fine, right? Like, there's no reason to just to not shoot your guns without your smoke. And this is what I see a ton of Cerberus players doing. in the games that I play. Is it's like their smoke ends and they're full HP, and now they don't shoot their guns for 2 minutes, and it's like this thing is not, we just looked at San Martin. This is not a San Martin hull where every battleship in the game 20Ks you at every angle, right? Like this is a very above, like kind of above average heavy cruiser hull. It's really not bad. Again, you are tall, you're a big target, but the hull is on its own not that bad. You don't just kind of randomly blow up at any angle in any range. But on this kind of HP, 100%, you want to, only be smoke farming, really. This game, as you can see, is going it's going incredibly poorly. We are down like 3-1 on HP. We're down a lot of points, and we're down ships. But this is still like 100% winnable. If this daring just spots ships in sea for me, we can probably just win this game, right? Because I've still got, a minute and a half of smoke left. So this Seattle can either, angle to Sherman and Buffalo or angle to me. There you see a bunch of nice overpens there. Pretty cool. Pretty fucking cool. Yeah, the AP is a broadside. Like I said, if you would use the Hindenburg AP, you're probably going to use the Cerberus AP. Just kind of overall. And I am also running prop mod, so something you do. You're pretty in juicy target for blind fires because you're so tall. Like you're probably one of the easiest smoke cruisers to farm. There you go, 21K, almost a dev strike, 5 citadels. Yeah, the AP is like Hindenburg AP. It might even have very slightly more just penetration than Hindi AP does, but the size, the height of the hull makes this thing one of the easiest cruisers in the game to blind fire in its smoke. It's incredibly fucking easy, but the crawling smoke, it has some theoretical disadvantages, right? Like you can't really use it for teammates. You can't really set it, leave it, and come back to it, right? But I do think that probably overall, this is the best smoke to farm in the game, the Cerberus smoke. And a lot of that comes down to like when you get blind fired, you can actually leave the smoke and keep it going. If you start just getting full pushed by ships, you can continue running without the smoke, or sorry, with the smoke propagating, right? And also the ship has a kind of like bafflingly good smoke fire penalty. I want to say it's like 7.3. We'll look at it in the port, but I want to say it's like 7.3, 7.5, somewhere around there. Which is really good. I mean, something like Des Moines has, an 8 something, right? Most cruisers with 203 have a higher smoke fire penalty than this. And crucially, most cruisers and all battleships obviously have a worse smoke fire penalty. So there's a lot of situations in the Cerberus where you can like run and propagate the smoke on your ass, and you, as long as you're within like more than 7.5 kilometers from the enemy, you can stay dark and you don't get smoke bloom spotted. But even like something like a Des Moines, Hindenburg, like any of these other cruisers trying to run you down, they typically all have a worse smoke fire penalty than you by like up to or over a full kilometer. So you can absolutely just trail smoke and not get spotted. Yeah, the smoke fire penalty is exceptionally good. It's a really interesting example. Maybe sometime next week we'll look at some of these other premium cruisers. We'll probably get to Gibraltar, which a big highlight of why Gibraltar is so bad is the smoke fire penalty being like unconscionably horrible for a cruiser that has to farm and smoke. The Cerberus is kind of showing like how good a smoke firing heavy cruiser can be if you just give it decent smoke fire penalty, right? Kind of a bit of a tangent, but again, this game is super winnable. I would say as long as our team doesn't fuck up, we probably will win. This daring is exhibiting another very important point that needs to be made in the Cerberus, which is if you have competent destroyer players, a competent destroyer player, the Cerberus is incredible. Um, it really is like an incredibly good cruiser if there's just the basic level of competence on the part of your destroyer. So, especially if you are playing the Cerberus with destroyer, but even like in here, just your random teammate has a fucking brain. Like this daring, what would most daring players be doing here? Right? They'd be smoking up to get their own meaningless damage on this guy. And this is what I mean. It's like that guy missed his smoke fire, his blind fire on me, but like I can just reposition. I can shoot because he's still on reload, and then I can slow back down into the smoke, right? But yeah, 9 out of 10 daring players in this situation, they'd be like, I want damage, blah, blah, blah. And they would be smoking and doing like, obviously a quarter the damage output that I'm doing on this guy. And you see here, I mean, the chance per salvo to start a fire is like basically similar to Zao. So you have like a very similar fires per salvo as something like Zao does, but you also get like obviously a much better reload. And this is, gonna kind of bring me back to the Zao of like, why would you ever play Zao over this ship? Like we looked at Zao a few games ago, and I said that Zao is not like a bad cruiser. It can still perform, but like I cannot think of a single reason I would play Zao over this thing. Like this thing has better damage output, better fire starting, like as good concealment because you can get it down to 10. Again, I would recommend not. I would recommend steering gears. It has a better hull. It has all things considered way better torps. Way better torps, all things considered. They're basically like the torps that Brisbane gets, but you just get one set per side, right? But they have like a very good cooldown, very good range, very decent damage. Crucially, they actually have firing angles that make sense and are usable, right? So, and then you can like farm from smoke. Like, if things aren't going well, if the CV humps you, you farm from smoke, and then you're just like objectively better against subs. Again, subsurveillance is like subsurveillance to me is like an incredibly cope consumable because a lot of these cruisers have horrible sub spotting, spotting from depths. There's a lot of subs that can just like park, and realistically you only get 20 seconds of this thing, so like you get one set of airstrikes off. But and Zao gets the 7-kilometer version. This is 8 kilometers, right? But this thing gets battleship planes. It gets 11-kilometer airstrikes, and it gets 3 of them. So that is why you're so much better against subs. Again, I'm just going to repeat. Like, if you told me that you were going to change one of two things, you were going to delete the sub surveillance from this thing, or you were going to just lower the airstrike range to 8, like, I'd say delete the sub surveillance. Like, just the fact that the airstrikes go 11 kilometers is the single greatest asset this thing has against submarines. Even though, yeah, they're GIMP damage compared to Battleship ASW drops. But back to the game. Bit of a good comeback here. Our Sherman is making a really interesting play. I don't really understand why he would position himself in like the worst spot humanly really imaginable, because we have no intel on the Montana. So I was, communicating with my daring, if you were looking at the chat, that I was going to play near these islands. But the Montana ends up coming back because the Sherman hit on the rock. But here we are going to see why steering gears is very, very nice. This is why steering gears is very, very, very nice. Very nice. Really incredibly high chance I would have died without the steering gears mod in slot 5 there. Because this, again, is a ship that has decent turning circle, but bad rudder shift, and that is always going to be kind of the prime candidate for taking steering in slot 5. Yeah, I'm probably dead to that salvo. We still would win the game, right? So it wouldn't have cost us the game, but a little bit scary. And that was a bit my fault too, because I just didn't notice. I saw the Sherman was over here, and I failed to recognize that he was rock camping instead of kiting out to the one line to spot things for us. So because of that, I did almost definitely come close to throwing the ship away. But yeah, steering gears coming in clutch as always at close range. Daring, honestly, MVP. I get the points, I get the kills, I get the big, the juicy 220k damage. But MVP for sure in my view. We would 100% lost this game if this guy was playing like any normal daring player, aka smoking and trolling spotting to get irrelevant fucking damage when I'm getting giant damage on everything, right? So very cool, very cool. Definitely highlighting how strong this ship is with a destroyer. Now I want you to imagine, okay, imagine this exact same game where this daring is like your average bot that either killed himself or didn't spot. How does this game go? Well, me fucking up and taking that 40k hit from Montana means that I basically have no ability to smoke farm because I have to smoke farm because I'm low HP, but now I can't because I wouldn't have a good destroyer player to spot for me. And this is kind of the issue that Cerberus has. Just as basically every smoke cruiser has, right? Is that you need spotting. But because your DPM is not the greatest, again, I'm going to go back to this concept of deterrence level DPM. Like, if you were in a Des Moines and you were on a rock, so you weren't spotting for yourself, right? And you're farming in your Des Moines from behind a rock, and the spotting goes away. Well, like, it's not the fucking end of the world because you can just walk out and spot for yourself and shoot. But like, the problem with the Cerberus is, one, it's like twice the size of Des Moines, so it's way easier to hit. But then two is like your damage output is, with all guns is like 2/3 what Des Moines is. In most situations, Des Moines practically has like usably something like 30 to 50, 50, 60% better DPM than Cerberus. So the Des Moines can park in the open, and yeah, it might eat shit, but it's going to pump out, even with just two front guns, so much damage that, again, it's like deterrence level damage. It sucks. Whereas, like, if you've got this thing open water at close range, it's not really much to be afraid of, because if you try to use all 12 guns in Cerberus at close range, like, you are going to get slammed. You're undeniably going to get slammed. Like I said, that doesn't mean you never open water farm, because, you should. You should definitely, HP is a tool. This is not a ship that typically blows up one shot, unless it's flat. Like, I went flat early in this game. You could argue I should have just died, right? Most battleship players would have been like, I can't believe I only took 90% of that cruiser player's health. What a rigged game, right? But yeah, you do to get any real effectiveness out of this thing, you do need that guy spawning for you. And as soon as you don't have, like, I had a very competent destroyer player, as soon as that competent destroyer player ceases to exist, then all of a sudden this cruiser becomes pretty dog shit. And as always, we are looking at two back-to-back games in randoms. This one I did jump in with two div mates, but I'm going to play a bit kind of on my own for most of this game. But the Cerberus games in this, today went pretty extremely well. It's a very consistent ship. At the end of the day, if you have solid HEDPM, solid being like 200k plus, and solid fire starting mean 10 plus, fires per minute base, you're gonna get good damage, right? And especially in a ship like Cerberus, that, I mean, again, it just doesn't really tend to just completely blow up. I mean, you see Schlieffen, Izumo, Palmer, Nebraska, Massachusetts. None of them overmatch my side plating. They, obviously all overmatch my bow and stern, but none of them overmatch the side plating. And, they're not like anything approaching like a crazy sniper, right? There's no Wisconsin that can stack 8 out of 9 shells on your forehead from 26 kilometers away, or some retarded shit like that, right? But this is what I mean by just consistency. Is like this Palmer being nose in here is pretty much going to be like a guaranteed probably 30, 40k damage. right? Um, yeah, you don't have the. I mean, 6K in a fire, right? Just right off the rip, and he's gonna immediately DCP because he is in fact a battleship player. Um, Very cool that he's gotten perma torp tubes destroyed. Half of the reason to play the armor being the torps and the secondaries, and then yeah, we'll just go ahead and yeah, we're just gonna go on a little side tangent here. The fact that any armament in this game can get permanently destroyed is the dumbest fucking thing alive. And this is going back again to how Wargaming's favorite class is battleship players. Because what class in the game is the least likely to permanently lose its main source of damage output? Well, of course, it's fucking battleship players, right? Can you get a perma turret break in a battleship? Yes. How often does it happen? Maybe once every 500 games, compared to cruisers and destroyers losing main guns and torp tubes. It's just like we spend all this time to balance ships based on what armaments they have, and then certain kinds of ships are more likely to permanently lose their armaments. All animals being in fact equal, some just being a little more equal than others, you might say. But like I said, 30k, free 30k damage on the Pommern. And I'd say that's kind of the number I'm looking for. Is I'm kind of looking for about 50k per smoke. I think that's a very reasonable number to hit in one smoke screen. Now, there's sometimes you get a fucking 100k damage from one smoke. There's times you get less, but I think 50k per crawling smoke is a good baseline to aim for. And I would say if you're getting substantially less damage than 50k per smoke, I would say that that's probably a sign that you're maybe not using them in very good positions. Not always. Obviously, the spotting can be trolled, things like that. But so here you see the smoke is over, right? But I mean, look at the map. Like, realistically, what can hit me? The Nebraska, maybe. Not very likely. 2 battleships on the same fucking pixel. So, like, there would be no reason here. And, against something like Yoshino, I have way higher damage output. I have higher fire starting, and he takes 60-second fires, and I take 30-second fires, right? And I'm going to penetrate him everywhere, right? We pen each other everywhere, but, this is a target where, like, it would make no sense in the Cerberus to try to stay dark until my next smoke. Like, that would be, I mean, honestly, like, deranged behavior. I'm just going to park 45 degrees to this guy. Very unlikely I take a Citadel, even if he loads AP. Of course, the average Yoshino player doesn't even really know what the 2 key does. And I'm going to try to look for an AP salvo, but against a target like this, it might sometimes be better to just stay on the HE. Because, I mean, realistically, I'm only going to Citadel this guy if he goes perfectly flat. But I'm going to penetrate him everywhere with HE. Like, you see the kind of HE salvos that I'm getting on him. It's a lot of damage. And then here now I'm being crossfired by the Andalusia. But, I mean, that's a really good example of why you shouldn't always be relying on the smoke. I mean, at the end of the day, you're a cruiser with 25 bow stern, 50k HP, and a 32 midsection. Like, and a decent amount of overall side thickness. Like, there's no reason in the Cerberus to play smoke only, right? I mean, like, if you would be shooting, I mean, I'm going to compare this thing to Zhao again, but, like, the Zhao has to farm damage while spotted, for the most part, right? I mean, outside of island situations, you basically have to farm damage while spotting. So, it's like, if you'd shoot your guns in the Zhao, you can shoot your guns in the Cerberus. Cerberus might dodge a bit worse, but, you see the kind of damage we're pumping into this guy, because we basically pen him everywhere. And he's going to beach, and I'm going to, obviously keep blind firing him because he's beached, at least until we get a fire. It's just a very reliable damage farmer. It really is. It's kind of damage farming easy mode, because even if you play this thing like a complete pussy, and you only farm from smoke, you can still very, very, very easily average over 100k damage in the Cerberus. Again, remember, I'm speaking as someone who is a self-admitted, like, mediocre damage farmer. And I think it's just down to the fire chance. I think the fire chance is overtuned on the Cerberus. I really do. I think the fire chance is too good. I think it's substantially too good, in fact. And this is kind of going to lead into another bit of a tangent about cruiser game design. I know we're probably sick of it. I talk about it in almost all these cruiser videos, but like, what does the Cerberus what does the Cerberus shit on? Like, what is the Cerberus designed to fuck? Well, it's kind of like mostly cruisers, because the AP is only good against cruisers. Um, the HE is like incredibly good against cruisers, and then it farms a ton of fire damage, right? And like, I just, I have a question for the battleship mains out there, right? I'm someone who plays like almost exactly the same amount of destroyer, cruiser, and BB games. When I am in my battleship and I am fighting a Moskva, or a Petro, okay? The way the fight works in my mind is they don't do a ton of damage to me, and I don't do a ton of damage to them unless I utilize high skill and good aim, right? You've got a bow in Moskva at 10 kilometers and you're good at aiming, you can still like reliably 12 to 20k it through the bow, right? Um, and so my question is like, is fighting armored cruisers in a battleship frustrating because they have armor? Like, to me, no. I don't find anything about it really frustrating. I think it just requires me to actually have to aim and not just nuke them from everywhere. And then I properly aim and I still nuke them. So I've never really understood the complaint against armored cruisers. But on the flip side, on the flip side, smoke farming with high fire chance is extremely obnoxious. Now, again, battleships have all these fire prevention skills and extra healing. They don't suffer from fires as much as, say, a cruiser does. But, I mean, if it's up to me, like, if I'm picking a perfect situation, I'm picking the lobby, it's like, I would rather 1v1 a Moskva who it's harder for me to damage than, 1v1 like a smoked up Genan or Cerberus who has spotting for him. I mean, this what I'm kind of getting at is like, is this what we need to do to make cruisers viable? Like how is wargaming not realized that some of the most viable cruisers in the game, Napoli, Petro, Moskva, and Stalingrad, are viable because they have some form of armor. They can't get one shot through the nose even at close range. They can still lose a third of their boat at close range through the nose, but they can never get one shot through the nose, and then they blow up when they're flat. I mean, I don't really know. Here we go, baby. Steering gears, yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, crazy damage, 228k in 10 minutes, right? And again, these are like low tier boats. This damage would be quite a bit higher, obviously on ships that have more HP because they would just live longer, right? This game is completely over. But again, you see what happened this game. Even though I'm divved, my div mates were doing their own thing on the west side, right? We were playing different games, but my Holland was spawning. My Holland was spotting for me like all game, basically. And when you have constant spotting in the Cerberus, it's just crazy good. It's crazy good. I'm kind of intentionally going more broadside to this guy because I didn't want him to go forward in time to dodge. I mean, but you do rely on it, right? You do rely on it now. Probably not as much as something like a Genan, because open watering in the Genan can be done. We're probably going to look at that next, being the other tech tree smoke farmer. But and I mean this guy just like accepted his fate. But you do definitely rely on spotting to maximize the Cerberus, but I don't think it's as crucial as something like a Genan because, you do have 52,000 HP to play around with, and you do bounce on side plating like everything but, Yamato, Shiki, Incomp, Satsuma. So you do have a lot more going for you in the Cerberus than some of these other cruisers, and I think that's just kind of a shame, and I just don't. Like, I don't understand how this ship can exist and Zhao can exist. Like, I don't understand how a developer can create this boat which, like, I mean, has basically a lot of Zhao's weaknesses, like the turret traverse is bad, the firing angles aren't very good, the AP and the HE don't have great pen, right? But like all Zhao has going over this thing is being a little smaller, a little more maneuverable, and having a little bit better accuracy. But like the Cerberus in all practical situations has better torps. In all practical situations, it has better guns. Like, yeah, the Zhao is more accurate, but like, does being 5% more accurate really matter when the other 12 gun cruiser fires three salvos for your two salvos? Like, are we making up for this with accuracy? Like, yeah, your one shot ability on DDs is higher in Zhao because you hit more shells. Your one chance on broadsides is a bit better, but like, it's baffling. It's truly baffling to me. And this thing gets better sub surveillance than the Zhao. It gets better airstrikes than the Zhao, way better airstrikes than the Zhao. So it's better against destroyers. Like, it's more resilient because it can actually bounce 30 overmatch guns. Crazy, crazy. I never thought we would see the day where a cruiser would have basically no main side plating that couldn't be overmatched by 457s, but we did finally get it. Um, you know, and like adding to the toxicity, like this is kind of my point. Is like, why can't, let's just go into the port. We can continue this discussion in the port. Just to summarize, the overall point being, to me as a battleship player, when I'm in my battleships, I would much rather feel like the damage I do to cruisers is skill based rather than um, them getting no skill fire, like just random non-pen HE fire damage on me, right? Like I would much rather fight a Petro in my Montana with his improved AP that I can angle to, skill issue. His very good armor that I can target over matchable parts of and still hit him good, skill issue, right? Like to me in my battleships, I would much rather fight an armored cruiser with like sane amounts of HE damage and then maybe some very improved AP. But I always want every engagement to feel like it's skill based. And when your destroyer fucks off or suicides and a DD spotting you, and there's a Cerberus or a Jinan, or a Smolensk or something like that, just 13 kilometers away, smoked up. It's like there's zero skill in this interaction. Like there's no skill because you can't shoot him really, and there's no skill on his part because you angle and he just starts fires. Right? It's just I don't know. I just want wargaming to bring back fucking armored ships, armored cruisers that do less DPM specifically less fire starting. I think it's just overall probably like better for the game. Makes battleships less objectively overpowered, but then also makes cruisers less toxic, especially to some of the battleships that they do pen everywhere. Like we still have battleships in this game like Bourgogne and Repub that you just like. Dude, the Cerberus against the Republic is legitimately hilarious. Like, it's it's actually funny as fuck fighting a battleship covered in 32 in this thing. Like, the damage per salvo is obscene. You get like a fire every salvo. It's just like obviously the same is true of Des Moines, right? Like Des Moines versus Bourgogne. It's like Des Moines wins that like out damaging Bourgogne 4 or 5 to 1. Um, so it's just like I just really wish we could give pretty much all cruisers, aside from small hyper-maneuverable ones, somewhat respectable armor. Um, Getting rid of the ability to one-shot bowing cruisers at close range, I think, is like crucial for cruisers being good. And then I'm fine with DPM going away. Anyway, ramble aside, starting with the equipment, you could definitely run Hydro Mod, probably should. I just haven't bothered. But this, I think, is crucial. I think you definitely want Prop Mod, but also I think steering gears is it's like a must. Um, 10 kilometer concealment, 1 kilometer better. You don't have a radar. You don't really want to be within 10 kilometers of a lot of ships like Des Moines that have radar. You don't really want to play at super close range in this thing. My kind of recommended range to play this is like the 13 to 16 kilometer range is like the sweet spot for Cerberus. But as you saw in that first replay, steering gears will save your life. I said this in my Henry video. It's like steering gears will just fucking save your life whenever you have to push in or you're caught open water. Um, And again, remember it's the 1-2 combo of you have to have a decent turning circle radius. This thing has a bad, it's like an 11-second base rudder shift, but because the turning circle is good, that's why rudder shift matters, right? If this thing had a 1,050-meter turning circle like some of these Russian cruisers do, there wouldn't really be any point to having a 6-second rudder shift. Because, yeah, you lock the rudder over in 3.5 seconds, but then, like, do you turn? No, you still don't turn, right? So, because you have decent turning circle, that makes rudder shift viable. Also, this ship's armor is very good mid, but horrific stern and ass, or bow and stern. So steering gears helps you a lot there. You definitely want reload, 18 cam base range. No, you don't even need this much range, right? Um, I'm running hydro. You're a smoke cruiser. It's nice to have hydro for sure. Captain build. I think there's some room here. This is kind of maximizing the utility and then some fire starting. This basically gives you about 10 seconds, 12 seconds maybe on your smoke duration. And then this is very nice actually, because if you run consumables reload with the flagged, which is 5%, you get a much more respectable, right? Cooldown time is 114. I want to say base, this is like 130 seconds. I believe I'm taking a solid 15 seconds or more off the base cooldown time on the smoke, which is very, very nice. Um, but also, this is a build that works fine on the Brisbane. Brisbane optimal build would take 3 points in the torp skills, and then I do think a truly optimal uh, build for this ship, you would probably drop these two skills and grease the gears for maybe 4-point AA. Because the 4-point AA skill is like god tier in CV lobbies. Because this thing is gigantic, and it's tall, so rockets and skip bombs like have a 100% hit rate against you. So every CV in the game with rockets and skips is going for your ass. Like you are their little piggy. So getting one airstrike is going to bonus you 30 seconds on your reload. I probably wouldn't bother with top grade gunner, although you could, simply because even with this build where I've got 11.1 kilometer concealment, I don't want to be that close to people. At least not normally, right? So you could do that, or you could drop fire chance, which is of dubious use because the base fire chance is so high. I believe it's 19% base, and then we're taking the flags, and it's 18 or 19 base. So, obviously this is only relatively buffing your fire chance by 5%. So you could definitely throw this on PT. That might be the better skill. Also, and this is going to sound super cringe, but the 4-point AA skill buffs the airstrike depth charge damage. Now, am I saying you take the 4-point AA skill for that? No. But I am saying that in a CV lobby, this is an excellent skill, and you get 11-kilometer airstrike range, and you get 3 airstrikes. So, this is actually a usable effect. It's basically useless on most cruisers, but on the Cerberus, that extra 15% airstrike charge damage is actually a factor. Not a great one, but it will actually help you. But mostly, yeah, this is just to get the smoke generator back sooner. And then we have the armor. The armor is a combination of really good and really dog shit. Your extremities are kind of like the worst in the game because of the size. It's crazy how big the nose and ass on this thing are, but you do get 32 side. You do get 32 side. Now, it's not much. It's only about maybe 60% of the horizontal real estate of the boat. But Cerberus has this unique thing going on with the bow and stern. Most cruisers, the side plating protects the barbettes, right? Kind of like a universal fact. Let's look at Goliath. The side plating goes up to the barbettes. Let's look at Zhao. The side plating goes up to the barbettes, right? Let's look at Des Moines. The side plating goes up to the barbettes, right? The Cerberus, for some reason, totally breaks this rule because they were terrified of giving it 32 side protection because the BB players would, of course, cry that they couldn't one-shot it at any range, at any angle, right? We can't have that. We cannot have that. So this nose and ass are gigantic. Like when you're nose in, a normal cruiser, this would be half, right? A normal cruiser, this 32 side, would continue all the way up to about right here, and you would just have this little bit of the nose to shoot at. So because the nose is so gigantic, you really can't just be nose into people, right? That is going back to the steering gears choice, okay? It's not just that it's good on this ship and good on any ship with this kind of stats and turning and rudder. Um, it's extra good on this ship because you really can't let people nuke your bow. It's just way too big. The bow is just way, way, way too big, and the Citadel is above the water a decent amount. Obviously, these are just overmatchable, so they're giving you no protection to battleships, right? So nose in, you have quite a large above water Citadel. Let's take, yeah. So yeah, you can just get one shot through the nose. So you definitely want to bait and turn in. Like I did with that Montana, you saw how much steering gears saved me. Close range Montana cell able to juke basically the whole thing, right? And then the last point about the armor would be, actually, first, this might look crazy that you only have 20, but it is covered behind with 203. So you can go flat to a lot of cruiser AP at long range and just not take non-pens. But the superstructure, man. Superstructure is fucking-gantic on this thing. So gunboats love you, right? Gunboats really love this thing. Really, really love it. So something else to keep in mind. You're really easy to get farmed down by like a Kleber, Gdansk, these kind of open water gunboats. I think that'll do it. Yeah, that will do it for the Cerberus. And we'll probably take a look at the GNAN next. Thank you for watching.